Good morning, everyone. Trust that my audio is loud and clear and that you could see my screen. So the pleasure is all mine. Thank you, Undral. Pleasure is all mine once again to deliver today's training for you. Today, as Undral described, we're looking at panic buttons, and we would be introducing our Wi-Fi panic button. So without further ado, let's get underway. Today's agenda isn't a very complex one. We'll be taking a look at our hardware panic buttons, software panic buttons. We have various types. Then we'll be going through a brief bit of configuration. So just some quick resources before we get underway. We do have a new support portal, which you can find at help.alertus.com. It has a new look and feel. It's very, very functional. One of our customers has used this to configure nearly all of his items in his implementation. By the time we kicked off, I was like, you don't even need me. So it's just a testament to how useful this new interface is. I hope you get some value from it. You could also reach out to our support via our portal, or you can reach us at support@alertus.com or via telephone. Here is a brief look at what our new portal looks like. Everything is nice and laid out. We have tiles for submitting tickets, lots of high visibility on the important bits. Okay, so today's presentation, panic buttons. So what are panic buttons? Panic buttons are a really quick way to get an activation out or for someone in your organization to request help. Think about maybe you may have a given scenario. It might be an active shooter, an aggressive assailant, or it could just be someone reporting a medical incident. These are situations that we use panic buttons for. In my graphic, here we have a war wall. So this customer has a bunch of panic buttons, each configured for different actions, and they could quickly just open this cabinet, hit a button, and it performs a specific action or several actions. So the new star of our lineup, the Wi-Fi panic button. This is a really convenient way to have someone send an activation on the go. It's a little device that you can keep in your pocket, perhaps clip to your waist, wear on a lanyard. And it's a really neat little device. So it has a little slider that once you slide it, reveals that red button. Slide it a bit more, and there's another button that you can assign to various functions, primarily for testing. But at the press of this button, anyone, anywhere that is within range of your Wi-Fi can quickly send an activation. Neat, it has a rechargeable battery that charges via USB-C. Unlike our previous Wi-Fi panic button, this one you can tell which device has sent the activation. You can tell from our server when that battery is low. And best of all, no additional infrastructure is needed. We simply leverage your existing Wi-Fi, and via that Wi-Fi, it connects to our server, and activations are nice and straightforward and simple. Next up, we have our hardwired panic button. Many of you would be familiar with this button. This hardwired panic button would have been shown from my initial slide. In my war wall, it's really simple. You lift that protective covering, you push that button, and you send an activation. It's good for hallways. It's good for anywhere where you need someone to just hit that button and send an activation or activations. Another hardware panic button that we have is our USB panic button. Use case, this is really helpful for front desk operations where you'd want someone to quickly report an incident. So someone shows up at your customer service or at your receptionist, and they're rowdy and that person feels threatened. They can quickly press that button and request help. So maybe security could respond or your emergency response team. Neat little feature about this button is that little blue button has, it changes colors depending on its state. So blue says, look, I'm ready to send an activation. Red could be, and it's configurable. You press it, it turns red, you know that an activation has been sent, and it's likely recessed. So simply passing your hand over it doesn't send an activation. You have to deliberately reach into it and press. It's a really good complement to the Alertus desktop software and our desktop Activator software, which I will also cover very shortly. And we're here. So, software panic buttons. These extend functionality beyond just having physical hardware. So, first box, I have a display of 2 desktop shortcuts. So your IT, once this is configured, we can pass the shortcuts to your IT. Once the application is installed, IT can pre-place these desktop shortcuts either on your desktop, taskbar, start menu. So with a standard placement, your emergency preparedness team can then train your users whenever you want to send an activation. Here's one method of doing it. You locate this icon, you double click on it, and that's all you need to do, and activation is sent. Neat thing about desktop shortcuts are that you can change the icon. So if you didn't, if you wanted something that your users would easily identify with, you can simply change that icon. All of the programming behind it remains the same, but now it's a lot more familiar to your users. So that's desktop shortcuts. Next, we have the Alertus desktop application. The Alertus desktop application, its primary function is to receive an alert to your desktop. So it's responsible for a full screen takeover or a pop-up, or even maybe a scrolling ticker. For those of you who may have been part of our previous sessions, we covered Alertus desktop. But it can also offer you a software panic button feature, which I have displayed at the top here. So once configured, users press it, and like the desktop shortcut, it fires off a predefined action. Next up, we have our desktop Activator software. So why have 2 desktop applications that both send panic button presses? One just offers you a bit more flexibility. So the desktop Activator software, we can do several different scenarios. From intruders to fire, suspicious person, as displayed in my example on screen, or for any scenario that your organization has. Now, what I always tell customers about desktop Activator is think about who you're giving this to and what you'd want them to do with it. We don't necessarily have to offer these options that I've displayed. Maybe you just want that activation to go to maybe your emergency response team. So if someone needs help, I can show you other ways that we can use this application to send custom information so that your emergency responders can then respond suitably rather than the standard pre-configured alerts like I am displaying. More software panic buttons. Now, these aren't a typical button, but they behave like one. And I thought that this would be really useful for you guys to see today. So here on my left, there is a form that can be configured. And this form describes what I mentioned earlier. You would like to request help or report an incident, but you'd like to provide a bit more context. So in my form, I can say what building I'm in, what room I'm in, my name. I can provide a contact number. I am working from home, so my room says home. But in your case, these variables could be anything. Then I can also describe my event. On screen, I have health, situation, assault, other, but these are entirely customizable. For those of you with sharp eyes, you would notice we have some red asterisks. These simply are mandatory fields, but we can turn that off if you'd wish. So you can give a user the option of filling out a field as mandatory or not. And once this is all sent, it's captured and presented to your emergency response team. Tons of context. The other one is via our mobile recipient app. So you can also report an incident. We have some pre-canned options here. And behind each of these, we configure certain behavior, look, feel, message. A neat thing about the mobile application is that you can also take a picture of an event and submit it. So a good example of that is, let's assume you had a dangerous animal on your campus and someone spots it. They can whip their phone out, open up one of these presets, snap a picture, tag its location, and then you can send that off with a brief message. So when your incident team or response team sees it, they can see a picture of the incident, in this case, a wild animal, a brief incident, and where it's located. So they can then take action, issue an alert and say, hey, stay away from this location. There's a wild animal in campus. Stay tuned for more information. So really, really powerful stuff. So this brings me to the end of my slides. What I'd like to do now is give you a brief demonstration of how this would work. So also, we have a new look and feel for our server that's been released. And this is what it looks like, but I won't be going through all of the features of our new UI on today's training. I'll just be showing you how to configure your system and maybe send an activation. So I'm going to get logged in. I won't be too heavy on configuration today because we have so many different options. We have tons of flexible ways to configure stuff so that it works for you. So here is, in this case, here is an active assailant scenario that I've configured. Simply clicking on this button gives me a confirmation. This is optional. I say yes. I get a confirmation message, and my server will become active in a short while. So here I have an active scenario. Here's my message. Here are some other variables that we would have pre-configured. And in a short while, my desktop will be triggered with an activation. For those of you wondering why there is a pause, clients check-in on a randomized interval, usually between 20 seconds and a minute and a half. And once they see that an alert has been issued, then they'll display their prescribed behavior. Awesome. So I had the word building twice. I didn't catch that, but it's just because my variable was administrative building. So we could drop that, entirely configurable. So this is a quick demonstration how that would work. Quick demonstration about when a user sends an activation, what your response team may see, or not just your response team, anyone that you have authorized to see that message. So if you wanted a user to send a specific incident to your entire organization, that's what that would look like. Here is that same scenario configured on my desktop activator. Clicking this, I get my confirmation message, and this process is repeated. My server becomes active, and just like before, my desktop will then become active. And you're not limited to just activating desktops. We can activate your desktops, your mobile phones, your text-to-speech speakers, alert beacons, just about any method of activation that you have configured for that. And with that quick demo, that brings me to the end of this presentation. I'll now turn over to Untral and we'll field any questions that you may have.
Sure. So the first question is, can we keep the device in charge all the time? I believe it's about the Wi-Fi panic button.
Keeping it charged all the time, on charge all the time. So general rule of thumb with any rechargeable device, you don't want to charge them, keep them at around, not have them dip below 40% charge. And that's because of battery technology. Most rechargeable devices are lithium ion or some type. And the way they work is they degrade with each charge and discharge. So keeping them at a certain level just extends battery life. Interesting thing about the Wi-Fi panic button is with a press every day, that device will be functional for about 2 months. That's with an everyday press for 2 months, you'll get that mileage out of it. So if you're only needing to activate it on demand, you'll get a lot longer battery life from it. And our server, of course, will let you know when certain devices are running low on charge, so you could give them a quick juice up.
Awesome. The next question is, can we receive low battery warning? I believe this is regarding regarding the Wi-Fi panic button also.
Yep, absolutely.
Awesome. Okay. So the next question is, if I wanted to supply my security guards with wireless alerts, how would that work?
Pick a method of getting that alert to them. So we provide many different ways to get alerts into the hands of response teams. So if they work in an environment where they have desktops, we could install our desktop recipient client, and whenever a given scenario is fired off, that goes to them, or it goes to them and anyone else that you want to have configured for that. So as long as you define that to us, when someone like myself is configuring your system for you, we ensure that that's set up and tested and working to your liking. So we can do desktops. Maybe we can push an event to their mobile phones. Via that app, they'll see a picture, they can see an incident location, they can see whatever message that we pass to them. We can do alert beacons, audio. The world is yours.
Great, awesome, thank you. So the next question is, how would the security guard select a particular alert?
So security guards are usually response teams. So if you wanted to give them the ability to also respond, and in this case, I mean respond by sending out a following alert. So our scenario, or my scenario is this. Someone reports an incident, they see it, they've vetted, they've confirmed it, and maybe they want to follow up with additional instructions. We can give them access to either panic buttons with prescribed actions. So maybe we can have a war wall like I illustrated on my first slide with different buttons assigned to different behaviors, or you can give them access to your console. Giving them access to your console could be really restricted. So they only see certain events that you'd like them to respond to. And use, via that method, they can also quickly send an activation off. Really easy to fire off. They can go to a preset activation if they're logging into your console. Select a scenario. This is just a test I had, but select a scenario. We can give them the ability to add additional instructions and send it. So this is, yep, this is configured. And it's literally this easy. They log in, select what they'd like to send, add any information depending on that scenario. Your server becomes active, and in a short while, my desktop will also go off with that message.
Great, awesome. So the next question is, when will this webinar be available? So this webinar will be sent to you via email either today in the later afternoon or tomorrow morning. And then we'll move on to the next question. How long is the battery life for the wireless panic button?
Again, it depends. It depends on charge, discharge, like a smartphone, like any rechargeable device. The amount of times it discharges usually tends to limit or tends to dictate the battery life. But these devices will, each device should give you, with regular use, should give you a solid 2 to 3 years before you start noticing any issues with your battery.
Awesome. This question is for the wireless panic button also. What type of low battery warning can we receive? So do they get an email if the battery is low, or does it beep?
Oh, we can configure that in our monitoring and notifications. So typically your IT teams will get a report that says, hey, we have, here are the status for these devices. And these devices have low batteries, so maybe we could, that then prompts them to reach out to their users to say, hey, give this a top up. And that can influence your organization simply issuing a policy that says, hey, every 2 weeks or every month, top your devices up just to ensure that they're always ready and available when you need them.
Awesome. Next question is, when activating an intruder from the desktop, can it be configured to not show any dialog boxes?
Oh yeah, absolutely. So here is my configuration file. And here we have confirm success. We can set this to false, true. And this is confirming this line. This is confirming that an activation has been sent, not confirming if you'd like to send one. These two configuration lines, they control if you'd like to have a user confirm that they would like to send a message, useful for preventing against false activations. Some organizations just would like to have that disabled. And in that case, they're willing to address any false activations as they happen. So the answer to that is yes, we can disable it.
Great. Next question. Can this be configured so that a single device will not trigger an alert, but multiple devices will?
So if the way I'm interpreting that question, if one device sends an activation, do nothing. But if multiple devices send an activation, then perform an action. The answer to that is yes, we can. That will be controlled via what we refer to as a custom event trigger. So here we have, I'm just going to call this test. I am forever fighting with my caps lock button. So here's my test. And here is panic button activation. So what we do is we select a bunch of criteria. And I'm just going to, in the interest of time, select random options. And I can add criteria and keep adding. Now, the interesting thing is, in my advanced settings, here is an AND operation. So for this to be true, I can say, let me be a bit more specific. Device ID equals equals 1. So if device ID 1 sends an alert by itself, let me think about this carefully. This is an overly simplistic example, but equals 2. This is a very unique example, as a matter of fact. I'm going to test this, but in theory, we have conditions. So we do an AND operation. And if all 3 of these devices send an activation, then it's evaluated to true. And then based on that, we can issue a preset alert, which has actions that says, hey, send this message to these users. So yeah, we could.
Great, awesome. I'm not sure if this question is for you, but if Nathan, if you don't know the answer, I'll have the account manager reach out to her. But
Sure.
she asked, is this system going to be implemented at Hopkins? I know for now we use the Alertus desktop activation, but have not seen the other devices. Do you know when it will be implemented? I'm not sure if you worked on Hopkins account, but if not, I can direct her question to their account manager.
I did briefly, but it's a question. You are correct. That is a question that the account manager would have a better insight on based on the needs of Johns Hopkins.
Great, awesome. So we will take the last question, and the last question is, I think she wanted to know about the battery life in between charges. So if you charge it to the full battery level, is the Wi-Fi panic button going to last for a day or a week?
So with everyday presses, taking it to 2 months before it's fully discharged, we hope you don't have a press every day. That would mean you have an incident every day. But if that device is not being triggered very often, your battery life on a single charge is going to go beyond 2 months. So you may get 4 months, 5 months before that. It's like a car remote or some other type of remote. The speed at which that battery depletes depends on how quickly it's being used.
Okay, great. We have one more question. Can you show me how to make the separate desktop icons?
Sure, absolutely. So here's an icon. And this works for any icon. If you like to copy this icon, you hit an easy way to do it. By far not the easiest, not the only way, but you can hit Control and drag it. And that creates a copy of your desktop, your desktop shortcut. You could right click on it, rename it. So let's assume this were medical emergency. You name it. And if you would then like to associate this with a specific behavior, then you take a look at your desktop configuration file. So here is Panic 1, which is my active assailant. And here's Panic 2, which is a stat alert. I do have it disabled, but enabling it is as easy as changing this value to true. But key takeaway here is the difference between Panic 1 and Panic 2. Active assailant, stat alert. My Panic 3 is shelter in place and so on. So we already have one associated with Panic 1, my active assailant. So let's take a look at its properties. Oh, that's a shortcut of a shortcut. All right. But essentially, we could have right-clicked, copied, and also pasted and changed its name. The important thing here is where it says target, you simply add Panic 1 or Panic 2 or the corresponding panic number that corresponds to your desired behavior.
Awesome. Sounds great. So that was our last question. I wanted to thank Nathan for a great presentation, and I want to thank the attendees again for joining our program, and keep joining our program. I want to say thank you all. Please fill out the survey on your way out to help us better serve you. I hope to see you in 2 weeks on May 19th, where we will talk about our new user interface on our console that we briefly mentioned before. And if you have any questions or additional comments, please feel free to contact support or your respective account managers. And again, we will share the webinar recording with you either later in the day or tomorrow morning. And I hope you all have a great day.
Thank you all.